I was 24, broke, and living in my friend's garage when I stumbled into the idea that changed my life and nearly destroyed it too. This isn't one of those drop-shipping fairy tales or crypto moonshots. My story starts with rotisserie chicken. I was working nights at a gas station in Fremont, California. The job paid $14 an hour, and I was barely covering rent to sleep on a foam mattress between a washer and a stack of dusty sports gear. I had no real degree, just a semester and a half at San Jose State before I flunked out. But I was obsessed with side hustles. I tried flipping sneakers, lost $800, selling novelty mugs on Etsy, sold 11 in 6 months, and even a YouTube channel reviewing old routers. Don't ask. Nothing stuck. One night, while on my 3 a.m. shift, a regular came in, an older guy in construction who always bought the same thing, a rotisserie chicken from the hot case and 2 Red Bulls. I made some dumb joke like, "You starting your own chicken restaurant or something?" And he goes, dead serious, "Nah, I repackage him and sell him to tech bros on DoorDash." That conversation haunted me. The guy claimed to make $400 a day just buying rotisserie chickens from grocery stores, chopping them up, tossing them with rice and some sauce, and selling them as protein bowls on delivery apps under a fake brand name. I didn't even know that was possible. I Googled like crazy the next morning. Turns out there was a whole world of ghost kitchens and virtual brands that basically existed only on delivery apps. No storefront, no staff, just branding, packaging, and hustle. The gears started turning. With $213 in my bank account and another $300 on a maxed out Capital One card, I launched Power Fuel Kitchen. I made a free logo on Canva, created a menu of 5 clean-eating bowls, and signed up with DoorDash under a friend's LLC that he never used. Don't do this. It's legally sketchy, but I was desperate. The kitchen? My friend's garage. I bought a used mini fridge on Craigslist, 2 hot plates, and a rice cooker. I prepped everything myself. Grilled chicken breast, roasted sweet potatoes, brown rice, steamed broccoli. The secret was the sauce. I made a spicy tahini thing that I'd put on everything. It photographed well and masked any dryness from overcooked chicken. The first week, I made $148 in orders and got 2 5-star reviews. By the third week, I was doing $600 in sales a week. I reinvested every dollar into better packaging and ingredients. I pretended Power Fuel Kitchen was a local meal prep brand for busy professionals, and honestly, it worked. I didn't sleep. I prepped from 6 a.m. to noon, listed on DoorDash from noon to 8 p.m., and then did dishes and supply runs at night. I started adding vegan options just to get more visibility on the app. Within 3 months, I was clearing $2K a week in sales. I upgraded to a rented spot in a shared commercial kitchen in Oakland. That's when things got real. I hired my first employee, a 19-year-old culinary student named Tara who worked harder than anyone I've ever met. She was the one who convinced me to post on Instagram. One of her food pics blew up. A local micro-influencer reposted it. Next thing I knew, I had people asking for pickup orders and subscriptions. That's when I hit a wall. DoorDash suspended my account. They claimed I was violating policy by switching addresses too often. I guess they finally noticed I'd gone from home chef to commercial operation without telling them. Overnight, I lost 80% of my income. I panicked. I had $11,000 in inventory and no way to move it. I couldn't pay kitchen rent, and I'd just agreed to pay Tara a real salary. That was one of the lowest moments of my life. I almost shut it all down. But Tara didn't let me quit. She said, "Why don't we sell directly? Screw the apps." So we did. I learned to build a Shopify store in 48 hours. I offered local delivery within 15 miles, charging $5 flat. Tara helped me build a menu that rotated weekly with new sauces and seasonal veggies. I spent every night manually DMing fitness influencers in the Bay Area. We sent them free meals with branded cards and discount codes. Some ignored us, but a few posted. That was all we needed. By month 7, we were at $6,000/week in direct orders. I bought a beat-up Prius for deliveries, then hired a driver, then another. We called ourselves a micro-meal brand for ambitious people. It sounded made up, but it stuck. We grew fast, too fast. I got cocky and tried expanding to LA. I spent $12 setting up a ghost kitchen there. Hired a local team, but I didn't know the market. I tried running it remotely and ignored every warning sign. In 6 weeks, the LA kitchen was losing $3K/week. Customers complained about cold food and weird textures. My brand didn't translate. I had to shut it down and eat the losses. That taught me something huge. Stay close to your customers. Back in the Bay, I doubled down on what we were good at. I started a text-based subscription list. I asked customers what they wanted to see on the menu. I built in feedback loops. We launched a referral program and a company catering tier. We got our first big B2B client, a fintech company that ordered 80 lunches a week for its team. In year 2, Power Fuel Kitchen did $647,000 in revenue. I finally paid myself a real salary, moved out of the garage into a tiny studio, bought a proper prep fridge. Tara became my co-founder and now owns 20% of the company. We've stayed small and profitable. No outside investors. No more expansion plans until we feel it in our bones. The garage days still haunt me. The smell of hot rice and cheap plastic lids. The fear every time my phone buzzed at night. But I wouldn't trade it. If you're reading this hoping for a magic idea, forget it. Just start weird, start small, and listen like your business depends on it, because it does. And don't sleep on rotisserie chicken. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. So this whole thing started in 2016 when I got laid off from my job at a mid-sized software firm. I was a back-end dev, decent pay, nothing crazy, but enough to keep my studio apartment and go out for decent sushi once a week. The layoff was brutal, not in the sense that I didn't see it coming, but in the way that it wrecked my self-esteem. The email hit my inbox at 10:42 a.m. By 11:30, I was driving home with a box of my crap and no real plan. That's when the first idea hit. I decided to build a productivity app. Not just any app, but the anti-Trello simple, distraction-free, built for people like me who just wanted to see what the hell they were supposed to do each day. I called it Listicle. Yes, I thought the name was genius. It was not. I spent 4 months coding that thing in my apartment, using up my severance and then tapping into savings. I hired a UX freelancer from Upwork who ghosted me halfway through. But I kept pushing. When I finally launched Listicle, I got a total of 37 downloads. Most were friends. I think my mom made 3 accounts just to support me. I tried Reddit ads, Facebook groups, even sent cold emails to bloggers. Nothing worked. Turns out the market was beyond saturated, and I was just another guy yelling into a hurricane of noise. I gave up on Listicle but convinced myself I just needed a better idea. Enter failure number 2, a physical product this time. A whiteboard notebook with erasable pages, yes, like Rocketbook, which I discovered only after I had ordered my first 200 units from a sketchy supplier in Shenzhen. This time I actually did a Kickstarter. Got maybe $800 of the $10,000 goal. One guy messaged me and said, "Why would I buy this when Rocketbook exists?" That hurt, because I hadn't copied them. It was just parallel bad timing and research. I ended up giving those notebooks to friends, and I still have 40 of them in my closet. At this point, I seriously considered giving up. I got a job offer from one of those trendy AI startups in SF $110K salary, options, and a fridge stocked with LaCroix. But something about taking that job felt like admitting I'd lost. I don't know if it was pride or stupidity, but I declined. I started working freelance again. Small back-end gigs, WordPress fixes, scraping data, whatever paid the rent. And then came the random Slack message that changed my life. A client asked me, "Can you make a scraper that pulls product info from Shopify stores? I want to analyze competitor pricing." I built the tool in 3 days. It scraped product titles, prices, descriptions, and stored it all in a dashboard. Nothing fancy, but this guy loved it. Paid me $1,500, then said, "Can you make this a subscription?" Something clicked. I asked myself, what if there were a SaaS product that helped small e-com stores monitor competitors in real time? There were tools out there, sure, but most were either bloated or crazy expensive. I figured there was room for something lean and focused. So I spun up an MVP. Built the backend in Python using ScrapePy and Fast API. For the frontend, I used a super barebones React setup. I called it Price Pilot. That name, at least, didn't suck. I posted about it in a couple indie hacker communities, offering early access for $9/month. Got my first 20 users in 2 weeks. One of them emailed me saying, "This saved me 3 hours a day." That email became the centerpiece of my landing page. I made a conscious decision to go slow and small. I added just enough features to make people stick around. CSV exports, alerts for price changes, and multi-store tracking. Every time a user emailed me a feature request, I logged it. If 3 people asked, I built it. By month 6, I had 200 paying users. Not life-changing money, but $2K/month felt like validation. Then I hit my first real problem, Shopify rate limits. My system was scraping too aggressively, and stores were starting to block the bots. One guy threatened to sue. I had no lawyer. I panicked. I almost shut it down. But then I found a workaround using their public API and rotating proxies. It cost me an extra $300/month in server fees, but it kept things running and clean. By month 12, I hit $10K MRR. That felt surreal. At that point, I realized I couldn't do this alone anymore. I hired a part-time front-end dev, the same guy who ghosted me on Listicle. He apologized and turned out to be awesome. We rebuilt the dashboard, made it mobile-friendly, added more graphs and charts. Then came the big break. A mid-sized DTC brand emailed me out of the blue. They had 20 sub-brands and wanted to monitor all their competitors. They offered $500/month for a custom setup. That was more than I made in any month freelancing. That deal changed how I thought about Price Pilot. I started offering custom enterprise plans. 3 months later, we had 5 enterprise clients and were doing $38K MRR. I formed an LLC, hired a support rep and a part-time data engineer. By year 3, Price Pilot was clearing $750K/year. We become the go-to tool for mid-sized e-com brands. I reinvested everything into the business. I still worked in hoodies and lived in a modest apartment. The weirdest moment of all? I posted a job listing for a senior engineer. Got a resume from my former boss at the company that laid me off. We had a Zoom call. He didn't recognize me at first. I asked if he remembered laying off a back-end dev named Ray back in 2016. The look on his face was priceless. He didn't get the job, but not because of petty revenge. He just didn't know modern stacks. But yeah, I felt a little smug. Fast forward to today, we just crossed $1.2 million ARR. We're a team of 7, fully remote. I still write code. I still talk to customers. And I still have 40 useless notebooks in my closet as a reminder. The moral? I don't think there is one neat takeaway. I failed, then failed harder, then got lucky, but only because I didn't quit. I didn't build some world-changing company, but I did build something real, useful, and sustainable. And that, honestly, feels like more than enough. Would you like a version of this formatted for Medium or LinkedIn as well? I never thought selling frozen soup would change my life. I used to work in a mid-tier marketing agency in Chicago. The pay was okay, the coffee was weak, and the job felt like watching beige paint dry. My official title was something unnecessarily bloated like Brand Strategy Coordinator, which basically meant I spent 8 hours a day tweaking pitch decks and arguing about Pantone shades with clients who thought Comic Sans was edgy. The story starts 3 years ago, in a February so cold it made my bones creak. My roommate Lena had just been laid off from a private catering gig because the company folded during COVID. She had a side hustle making bone broth and old-school soups from her grandma's Ukrainian recipes. One night, she made this garlic and dill potato soup that hit me so hard with nostalgia, I nearly cried into the bowl. I asked if she'd ever considered selling it. She laughed and said, "Who'd buy soup from a broke Ukrainian in a tiny apartment kitchen?" Apparently, a lot of people would. We joked about it for a week, calling it the Broke Bowl. I even mocked up a fake logo on Canva, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Lena's soups weren't just good, they were a hug in a cup. And during lockdown, people were craving comfort food that didn't come from a can or a ghost kitchen. I posted a picture of her soup on Instagram with a caption like, "Quarantine Kitchen Goddess." Would you buy this? It got way more engagement than any of my usual posts. People actually DM'd asking if she sold it. That weekend we made 30 jars of soup, mason jars from Target, labels I printed on my office printer, and soup Lena made with love and the rage of someone recently unemployed. We posted on Facebook Marketplace and Nextdoor. By Tuesday, every single jar was sold. We made $420 in 3 days. I hadn't felt that excited in years. For the next few months, our evenings were spent chopping onions and filling jars. We cooked illegally in our apartment kitchen, risking eviction and possibly a minor health code violation. I built a Shopify site, which looked like garbage but worked. Lena managed inventory with a janky spreadsheet and a Sharpest system. Customers came from word of mouth. One woman bought 6 jars and told us it reminded her of her childhood in Kiev. We hit $2,000 in monthly revenue by month 3. It felt surreal. Then we hit a wall. Turns out you can't legally sell soup out of your apartment without a licensed kitchen. Surprise! We got a cease and desist from the city health department. We cried. We panicked. But after the meltdown, we started calling around and found a local commercial kitchen that rented by the hour for food startups. It cost $35/hour and was 40 minutes away, but it was our only option. We rebranded to Babka Broth after Lena's grandma. I spent $400 I didn't have on a new logo, better labels, and insulated packaging. Lena fine-tuned her recipes and we added a mushroom barley and a vegan beet borscht. We leaned hard into the Eastern European comfort food aesthetic. It was niche, but it stood out. Our big break came 6 months later. A local food blogger ordered some jars, loved them, and wrote a glowing review. Orders spiked overnight. We did $12,000 in revenue that month. We had no idea how to scale. We messed up orders. One guy got 6 jars of beet borscht when he'd ordered bone broth and emailed us in all caps. We fumbled forward. I quit my agency job after we crossed $20,000/month in recurring orders. Lena cried. I cried. My parents thought I was insane. We applied to a local food startup accelerator and got in. They gave us $15K in funding, office space, and most importantly, mentorship. I finally learned what COGS meant and stopped referring to everything as vibes. We moved into a full-time kitchen space, hired 2 part-time prep cooks, and started shipping nationwide. Our CAC was brutal at first. Facebook ads were a black hole, but we discovered our best-performing channel was TikTok. Lena posted a chaotic video of herself making borscht while ranting about capitalism in a babushka scarf, and it went viral. 1.2 million views in 2 days. Orders poured in. People loved the weird authenticity. We broke $50,000 in MR within our first full year. Fast forward to today. We've raised a $500K seed round, have 7 employees, and just signed a deal to stock Babka Broth in 30 Whole Foods locations across the Midwest. We do over $100K in monthly revenue and we're profitable. Lena now handles recipe our /&D and community. I handle ops and growth. We argue constantly, but we've learned to fight productively. We're not just business partners, we're chosen family. Last week, Lena's grandma called us from Ukraine, and we showed her the soup in a Whole Foods freezer. She started crying. So did we. I don't know if we'll ever be the next Campbell's, but we made something real, from scratch, during a pandemic, with mason jars and blind faith. And it all started with soup. I was laid off in January 2023. I'd been a mid-level marketing manager for an e-learning company. The work wasn't exciting, but it was stable. Good benefits, enough PTO, and I'd finally gotten used to working remotely in sweatpants. When the axe came down, they said the layoffs were purely structural and not personal. Sure, I had just moved into a new apartment and had maybe 3 months of savings. The first week was denial. I played Xbox, told myself I'd take a short break before updating my resume. But something shifted around day 10. I was watching YouTube tutorials on branding, something I had dabbled in for years, and realized I knew this stuff better than most of the people making the videos. I'd helped launch 2 products at my last company that hit 7 figures. The credit went to the sales team, of course. But I knew what I'd done. So I tried something. I opened Fiverr and Upwork accounts and listed a few services: product launch consulting, branding packages, email funnel design. I priced myself low, like $50 for a basic brand audit. The first 2 weeks? Crickets. I refreshed Upwork every 30 minutes like it was Twitter. Nothing. Then one day, a founder from Berlin booked a $50 audit. I took it seriously, gave her a full 5-page PDF with suggestions and mock-ups. She loved it. Left a glowing review. By week 6, I had 5 clients. It still wasn't enough to pay rent, but it was momentum. By March, I made a risky move. I spent $1,800 of my remaining savings on building a clean-looking website with a funnel and client testimonials. I branded myself Launch Pilot, a solo consultancy for pre-seed startups needing go-to-market strategies. It sounded bigger than me, and for some reason, that helped. I also started a Twitter thread that went mildly viral. 7 mistakes I see every startup make before they even launch. That got me 300 followers overnight and 2 DMs from founders asking about my services. That month, I made $4,100. Not quite my old salary, but I saw the light at the end of the tunnel. Then April hit, and I hit a wall. Client work dried up. The leads stopped responding. I was ghosted by someone who had verbally agreed to a $5,000 package. I was tired, burned out, and started doubting everything. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe I got lucky a couple times, but this wasn't sustainable. I was this close to applying for full-time jobs again. Then something weird happened. A guy I'd helped in February for a $250 package emailed me out of the blue and said, "Hey, we just got into Techstars. Would love to bring you on monthly. What would that cost?" I threw out $500/month. He said yes immediately. That moment snapped me out of the spiral. I realized I couldn't just wait around for leads. I had to build systems, processes, something repeatable. So I did 3 things. 1. Created a Notion-based launch toolkit and started giving it away for free to early-stage founders in exchange for their email. 2. Wrote 3 high-quality, niche blog posts a week on my site, SEO optimized, with case studies and practical templates. 3. Started interviewing founders on a live Twitter space every Thursday under the banner Launch Stories, which gave me content, credibility, and networking opportunities. By June, I had a solid email list, steady traffic, and 3 retainer clients. I was making $9K/month. By August, I had to turn away work. I began hiring subcontractors, friends from my old marketing job who were also laid off. I trained them using the toolkit I'd built, systemized deliverables with templates, and upgraded Launch Pilot from a me business to a we business. By December 2023, we hit $215K in revenue. In January 2024, I launched a cohort-based course for founders, Launch in 30. It sold out the first cohort in 4 days, $32K revenue from that launch alone. A VC firm contacted me in March asking if I could run the branding and go-to-market work for their entire accelerator cohort. That's now a $75K contract. We've now served over 130 clients, grown the email list to 8,000, and I employ 4 full-time contractors and 2 part-time. Q1 of this year? $376K in revenue. My profit margins hover around 50%, since we're mostly service-based with some digital products. I still work 50 to 60 hours a week, but I take Fridays off. I travel. I pay my people well. And I finally feel like I'm building something mine. Here's what I wish I knew when I started. Asterisk pricing low only works if you have a plan to raise it fast. I stayed too cheap too long. Asterisk systems beat talent. Templates, SOPs, and processes made this sustainable. Asterisk email lists, social media. I chase likes when I should have been chasing subscribers. Asterisk hire before you're desperate. If I had waited any longer, I would have burned out completely. And the biggest one? Don't assume a slow month means failure. Sometimes the business is working, just not on your schedule. Today, we're on track for $1.4M this year. I don't say that to brag. I say it because 18 months ago, I was lying on my couch thinking I'd peaked in a cubicle. If you're laid off, stuck, or scared, you don't need all the answers. Just move. Build something tiny. Charge someone $50. Take it seriously. Then keep going. Back in 2016, I was 29 years old and utterly convinced that I was destined to be my own boss. The idea had brewed for a while, but like most people, I kept talking myself out of it with every stable paycheck I got from my tech consulting job in Austin. I had a good life, decent salary, working remotely, and enough flexibility to travel and mess around with hobbies on the side. But deep down, I hated that I was building someone else's dream. The idea that finally pushed me over the edge wasn't glamorous. I didn't invent the next Uber or create some AI that could write Shakespearean sonnets. I started a mobile car detailing business. You read that right. It started because of my neighbor, Doug. One day, I saw him meticulously washing and detailing his truck in our apartment complex parking lot. The guy had buckets, vacuums, sprays, the whole works. He did it every 2 weeks like clockwork. I asked him why he didn't just go to a car wash, and he laughed. They don't do it right. I pay attention to the stuff they miss. So I pitched a half joke. You ever think about doing this for other people? Doug stared at me for a second and said, you'd be surprised how many people ask me that. And that's how the seed was planted. I started Googling like a maniac. Turns out, mobile detailing was a legit industry, low overhead, no need for a physical shop, and a strong demand from busy professionals who wanted their car cleaned without lifting a finger. I ran the numbers and saw the profit margins were insane compared to most service businesses. I didn't know the first thing about car detailing, but I knew how to build websites, run ads, and hustle. So I told myself, screw it. I'll learn. I didn't quit my job right away. Instead, I invested $1,500 from savings to buy equipment, a powerful vacuum, extension cords, buckets, brushes, cleaning agents, microfiber towels, a portable water tank, and a pressure washer. I bought a used Honda Element off Craigslist for $200. It was ugly but reliable. I practiced for a month. I detailed my own car 10 times, then my girlfriend's, then my parents' and coworkers. I watched hundreds of YouTube videos and read every detailing subreddit post I could find. Once I felt semi-confident, I built a basic website and called the business Pristine Ride. I made a Google My Business listing, slapped some vinyl decals on the element, and started running $5/day Facebook ads targeting people within a 10-mile radius who drove luxury or newer cars. First week? Crickets. Second week? 2 inquiries, 1 no-show, 1 skeptical woman who ended up tipping me $20 because she loved how I got dog hair out of her trunk. She posted about me on Nextdoor, and within a week I had 8 appointments. I started working every weekend and some evenings. Word spread. After 2 months, I was booked 3 weeks in advance. That's when I realized I was making more from detailing than I was at my consulting job. It took 4 more months for me to work up the courage to quit. The day I handed in my resignation, I was terrified. My parents thought I was having a breakdown. My boss thought I was joking. But I had savings, a growing customer base, and something I hadn't felt in years, real drive. I started detailing full-time, 6 days a week. I was up at 6 a.m., on site by 7:30, and home around 7 p.m. My body hurt like hell, but every dollar I made was mine. No middlemen. No office politics. Within a year, I hired Doug as my first employee. He was skeptical at first, said he didn't want to turn his hobby into a job. I offered him $20/hour, plus tips, and a cut of any package upsells. He said yes. Then came year 2. I leased a second van, hired 2 more guys, and started turning Pristine Ride into a real operation. I systemized everything: training manuals, cleaning procedures, scripts for upsells, even playlists for different neighborhoods to set the vibe while we worked. I was obsessed with getting it right. By 2019, we had 4 vans and covered most of the Austin metro area. I stepped back from daily detailing and focused on sales, hiring, and expanding. We started offering monthly subscriptions, 1 detail per month, automatic billing, discounted rates. That was a game-changer, consistent revenue I could count on. Then COVID hit. March 2020 bookings dropped by 70%. People stopped driving. Everyone was scared. I had to furlough half the team and rethink the business overnight. I pivoted to sanitization services, added EPA-approved foggers, and offered health-safe interior cleanings. I ran ads that focused on disinfecting touch points, steering wheels, handles, HVAC vents. It worked. We survived. In fact, we grew. People were willing to pay more for peace of mind. By late 2021, I had 12 employees, 6 vans, and an office with a small garage space. We were clearing over $600K in annual revenue with 28% net profit. I was finally taking a salary north of 6 figures and still had money to reinvest. But here's the weird part. I started getting bored. Not with the business, but with the grind. I've been going nonstop for 5 years. I missed building, creating something from scratch. So I started documenting the whole journey online. I posted on Twitter, now X, made behind-the-scenes TikToks, even started a blog. To my surprise, people ate it up. They loved the started with a bucket and a dream narrative. A few even DM'd asking if I teach them. That gave me the next idea: build an online course on how to start a mobile detailing business. I spent 3 months building a no BS curriculum, complete with vendor lists, pricing strategies, advertising templates, and training videos. Launched it for $299 and posted it to my small email list and a few Facebook groups. Sold 89 copies in the first 2 weeks. That was more than I made some months in year 1. Today, I still own Pristine Ride, but I've handed day-to-day operations to my GM, Maria. She started as a part-time detailer and now runs the whole operation. I check in weekly, but mostly I focus on helping others replicate what I did. I run a small community of service business entrepreneurs and just launched my third info product, a CRM template for solo operators. Looking back, I wouldn't change anything. I didn't build a unicorn. I didn't get VC money. But I built something real, profitable, and meaningful, starting with $1, 500 and a Craigslist car. And if you're reading this wondering if your dumb idea has legs, start small. Try. It doesn't have to be sexy to be successful. About 2 years ago, I got laid off from my job as a product manager at a mid-sized tech company. It wasn't a surprise. There were rumors of restructuring for months, and I wasn't exactly indispensable. But it still sucked. I was living in an expensive city, I had a lease I couldn't break, and my savings were barely enough to last 3 months. The worst part wasn't even the financial hit, it was the humiliation. I had built my entire identity around my career. I posted on LinkedIn like I was some Silicon Valley philosopher. You know the type: generic motivational posts, humble brags about work wins, occasionally trying to sound deep with phrases like build, measure, learn. When I got laid off, I panicked. And instead of being honest about it, I did something incredibly dumb. I posted a long, self-congratulatory status about leaving to pursue a new venture. I didn't have a venture. I barely had a clue. But the likes rolled in. People congratulated me. Some even offered to intro me to investors. So I leaned into it. I told people I was building a platform to help remote teams manage creative collaboration asynchronously. It sounded fancy and vague enough that no one asked questions. In reality, I was sitting on my couch in gym shorts, trying to figure out what the hell that even meant. For the first few weeks, I just kept up the charade. I made some wireframes in Figma. I bought a domain name. I posted screenshots that made it look like I had a dev team. I even downloaded a fake Slack UI kit and staged fake team conversations. If anyone had looked too closely, the illusion would have crumbled instantly. Then something strange happened. An ex-colleague DM'd me saying their new startup was struggling with exactly what I was building. They asked if they could try it. I panicked again, but instead of admitting I had nothing, I said I could give them access to an early prototype in 2 weeks. So I did what any self-respecting fraud would do. I opened up Google Slides, cobbled together an interactive mock-up, and passed it off as a beta. It was clunky, manual, and did almost nothing. But they loved it. Within a month, they asked if they could pay me to keep using it. I said yes. They sent me $200 via Stripe. I had accidentally made my first revenue. I spent the next 6 weeks scrambling to build a real product around the idea. I watched every Bubble.io tutorial I could find. I taught myself just enough JavaScript to duct tape functionality together. I was working 14-hour days, fueled by panic and iced coffee. More users came through word of mouth. Mostly friends of friends, but the interest was real. By the end of the 3rd month, I had 5 paying customers. Still mostly no-code, still mostly held together with spreadsheets and Zapier's apps. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. Then a growth advisor I met through a Slack community offered to help for equity. She saw potential, and more importantly, she had actual experience. She helped me clean up the onboarding flow, rewrite the landing page, and create a proper pitch deck. The deck was more for optics than fundraising. But again, LinkedIn came through. One of my old coworkers, now at a VC firm, messaged me. We hopped on a Zoom call. I told him I was early stage but cash flow positive, technically true. He loved the scrappiness. Said it reminded him of early Notion. He offered a $250K pre-seed check. I almost said no because I felt like a fraud. But I said yes because my bank account was down to 3 digits. That money gave me breathing room. I hired 2 contractors, a real developer and a part-time designer. We rebuilt the product from scratch. It actually started looking like a real SaaS tool. From there, things snowballed. We launched on Product Hunt, got some buzz, landed a few more customers. I started going on podcasts, still pretending like I had a master plan. We hit $10K MRR 6 months in, then $50K MRR a year later. I now have a team of 7 full-time employees. Our customers include a few recognizable names in the tech space. We recently crossed $1 million in ARR. And yet, every time I look at our Slack, part of me still feels like that guy faking Slack convos 2 years ago. I've since come clean to my team about how it all started. They laughed more than I expected. One of them said, "Honestly, that's more common than people think." Maybe so. All I know is, I didn't set out to build a company. I just wanted to save face. But somewhere along the way, the pretending became building. And the building became real. I still don't feel like a real CEO. I make more mistakes than I care to admit. I Google half the jargon investors throw at me. I don't have a 5-year plan. I barely have a 5-week plan. But I have a product, I have a team, and I have customers who thank us for solving a real problem. I guess that counts for something. I never expected that a $10 bet with a friend would lead me down the path of becoming a successful entrepreneur. But that's exactly what happened. The story starts when I was fresh out of college, struggling to find a job in a market that was already flooded with talent. Like many others, I had dreams of working for a big corporation, climbing the ladder, and living the American dream. But life, as it often does, had other plans. It was the summer of 2012, and I had just moved back into my parents' house after graduation. My friends were either already settled in their careers or in graduate school, and I was still struggling to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. It felt like everyone had a plan except me. I spent my days sending out resumes, attending job fairs, and hoping that something would stick. Meanwhile, I spent my nights talking to my friend John, who had already started his own small business doing freelance web development. One evening, over a few beers, John told me he was making a decent living off his side hustle, creating websites for small local businesses. I was skeptical. How can you make money building websites for small businesses? Don't they already have websites? Isn't it a saturated market? I asked. John laughed and said, "That's exactly what I thought at first. But there's a huge opportunity in helping local businesses get online. Many of them don't know how to navigate the web, and they're missing out on so many potential customers." I wasn't convinced, but John made me a bet. $10 says you can't build a website for a small business and get paid for it. No tricks, no favors, just go find a client, design the site, and make some money. You in. At first, I thought it was ridiculous. Why would anyone pay me for something I had no real experience with? But the more I thought about it, the more intrigued I became. Maybe I could give it a shot. Worst case, I'd lose $10, and I'd have a funny story to tell. Best case? Maybe I could make some real money. I started doing research. I watched YouTube videos, read articles, and studied the basics of web design. I knew the fundamentals of HTML and CSS from some college classes, but I had never built a full website from scratch. After a week of research, I was ready to take the plunge. I figured my best bet was to approach local businesses, particularly the ones that didn't have a strong online presence. I would offer them a simple website, nothing fancy, just something that would help them get noticed on the web. The next day, I grabbed a list of businesses from a local directory and set out to talk to them in person. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I had to sell myself. The first few businesses I visited had no interest. One guy even laughed at me and told me to get lost. But I didn't give up. After a few more rejections, I finally found a small coffee shop that was willing to listen. The owner, Sarah, was skeptical at first, but I convinced her that having a website could help her attract more customers. She was hesitant but agreed to let me try, and we settled on a price of $500 for a simple site. The next few weeks were a blur of late nights, endless coding, and occasional panic attacks. I had never worked on a project of this scale before, and I was constantly afraid I wouldn't deliver. But I pushed through. I communicated with Sarah regularly, updating her on my progress and making sure I was meeting her expectations. When the website was finally ready, I presented it to her with a mix of excitement and dread. To my surprise, she loved it. The website wasn't anything revolutionary, but it was clean, simple, and functional, and it made her coffee shop look more professional online. She paid me the full $500, and I couldn't believe it. I had just made money doing something I had no idea how to do a month earlier. But I also realized something. I loved it. I loved the process of creating something from nothing, and I loved helping a local business grow. It was the kind of work that kept me engaged and excited. That $10 bet changed my life. I didn't become a web design guru overnight, but I had learned something valuable. There was a market for this kind of work, and I was capable of doing it. From that point forward, I decided to make it my mission to learn everything I could about web design and start a business. The next step was to build a portfolio. I knew that I needed to showcase my work to attract more clients, but I had only completed one project. I reached out to a few other local businesses and offered to design their websites for free in exchange for testimonials and permission to use the sites in my portfolio. Slowly but surely, I built up a small collection of websites, and as my confidence grew, so did my client base. By 2013, I had officially turned my side hustle into a full-time business. I was no longer just taking on small projects for friends and family. I was working with local businesses and even a few national brands. But the journey was far from easy. I faced countless challenges along the way, learning to market myself, dealing with difficult clients, and managing the financial side of the business. There were times when I doubted myself and wondered if I was in over my head. But I never gave up. I kept pushing, kept learning, and kept growing. In 2014, I hired my first employee, a fellow web designer named Matt, to help with the increasing workload. By 2016, my company had expanded to a full team of 5, and we were handling projects for clients all over the country. We had moved out of my parents' garage and into a small office downtown. The business had grown far beyond what I could have imagined back in 2012, when I took that $10 bet. Now, looking back, it's hard to believe how much my life has changed. That $10 bet was the catalyst for everything that followed: the late nights, the challenges, the successes, and the failures. But it taught me an important lesson. Success doesn't always come from following a straight path. Sometimes, it's about taking risks, embracing the unknown, and being willing to fail. I didn't start with a grand vision of building a company. I started with a bet, a belief in myself, and a willingness to learn. Today, I run a successful web design agency that serves clients worldwide. We've built websites for Fortune 500 companies, and I've been able to hire a talented team of designers and developers who share my passion for creating great work. But the thing that still excites me most is helping small businesses thrive online. After all, that's how it all began, with a small coffee shop and a simple website. If I could give any advice to someone starting out on their entrepreneurial journey, it would be this: don't be afraid to start small, and don't be afraid to fail. The road won't be easy, but it's the tough moments that will teach you the most. Take that first step, even if you're unsure of where it will lead. You never know what could happen when you take a risk, and maybe, just maybe, you'll find your own path to success. I started my journey as an entrepreneur when I was 25, fresh out of college with a degree in business that honestly felt more like a piece of paper than something that could make me rich or successful. I had big dreams of building a company, but no real understanding of how to get from point A to point B. I was living in a small apartment in a city where I didn't know anyone, working a 9-to-5 job in a marketing firm that I hated. I knew deep down that this wasn't the life I wanted, but I didn't know where to start. One day, I found myself scrolling through Reddit in my free time, as most people do, and came across a post in a subreddit about side hustles. Someone was talking about how they build a successful online store selling niche products, and I thought to myself, I could do that. The idea of having a business I could run from anywhere, with minimal overhead, sounded like the freedom I needed. But I had no experience in e-commerce, and honestly, I had no idea where to begin. The fear of failure loomed over me, but the desire to escape my current job and lifestyle was much stronger. I started by researching everything I could about starting an online business. I scoured Reddit threads, watched countless YouTube videos, and read blog posts. I learned about dropshipping, Shopify, and how to find suppliers. The more I learned, the more excited I became. I spent hours every evening working on my plan, often sacrificing sleep and social time. At first, I thought I could create a store that sold custom t-shirts, but as I researched more, I realized the market was oversaturated, and I needed to find something more unique. One evening, while browsing through some Facebook groups, I stumbled across a post from someone selling eco-friendly products. They were talking about how people were becoming more conscious about sustainability and that eco-friendly products were in demand. That struck a chord with me. I had always been passionate about the environment and the idea of contributing to something bigger than myself. I decided then and there to focus my store on eco-friendly, sustainable products. I took out a small loan from my savings, about $5,000, to get started. I used that money to set up a Shopify store, purchase a small amount of inventory, and pay for ads. The first few weeks were agonizing. I was working full-time, managing my store at night, and constantly trying to optimize my ads. I remember checking my store every day, hoping to see sales, but seeing nothing. Zero. Zilch. I felt like I was chasing a ghost, and there were times I almost gave up. But then, after about a month of testing different strategies, something clicked. I had been running Facebook ads targeting eco-conscious consumers, and one day I woke up to find my inbox flooded with orders. In a span of a few hours, I had made enough sales to cover the cost of the inventory I had bought. I couldn't believe it. My heart was racing as I processed each order. This was real, and I was doing it. I quickly realized that the key to success was not just getting traffic to the store, but creating a brand people connected with. I had to make sure my products spoke to the values I was promoting. I started incorporating sustainability into my messaging, offering educational content on my website and social media about how to reduce waste and live a more eco-friendly life. Slowly, but surely, I started seeing growth. The next few months were a blur as I juggled my full-time job and my side hustle, but my sales kept increasing. I remember hitting $10,000 in sales in my first 6 months, and I thought I had made it. It felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life. I kept reinvesting the profits back into the business, expanding my product range, hiring a small team to help me with customer service, and slowly building a brand people trusted. But, of course, things didn't stay easy for long. As my business grew, so did the challenges. Managing inventory, handling customer service, dealing with shipping issues, and keeping up with the constant need for fresh content became overwhelming. I also faced stiff competition from other eco-friendly brands that were growing just as fast. One thing I quickly learned is that success in business isn't linear. There were moments when I felt like I was losing control, and I had to take a step back to reevaluate everything. I hired a coach to help me with the business side of things. This was a game changer. She helped me refine my strategy, build better systems, and prioritize the tasks that actually move the needle. I learned the importance of delegation and not trying to do everything myself. The growth that followed was exponential. By the end of year 2, I had quit my day job and was running the business full-time. The first time I made a profit of $100,000 in a month, I was stunned. I hadn't anticipated that kind of growth, and it made me realize that I could really build something lasting. However, I knew I couldn't stop there. I had to focus on scaling and improving the customer experience. So, I hired a team of designers, marketers, and customer support reps to help elevate the brand. In the third year of the business, I faced a huge challenge. A major supplier of mine went out of business, and I had to find new suppliers quickly or risk losing a lot of customers. This was one of the most stressful times of my entrepreneurial journey, but it also taught me how to be resourceful. I networked like crazy, reached out to new suppliers, and eventually found a group of reliable partners who could deliver the same high-quality products. It was a wake-up call that no matter how successful you are, the journey is never smooth sailing. By year 4, my business had grown into a multi-million-dollar company, and I was able to expand my mission to include other aspects of sustainability, like carbon offset programs and initiatives to give back to environmental causes. I was able to hire more employees, invest in new products, and create even more content to engage with my customers. The brand had become a trusted name in the eco-friendly space, and I was incredibly proud of how far I had come. But even now, I still face challenges. The competition is fierce, the market is constantly changing, and there's always pressure to innovate. But I've learned to embrace the ups and downs of entrepreneurship and understand that it's all part of the process. I've also learned the importance of staying true to my values and building a business that I can be proud of. Now, looking back, I realized that I didn't need to have it all figured out from the start. I didn't need to have a clear roadmap to success. I just needed to take action and be willing to learn and adapt. Entrepreneurship is not a straight line. It's a winding road full of bumps and detours. But if you stick with it, put in the work, and stay true to your vision, you'll eventually reach your destination. My journey is far from over, but if I could give one piece of advice to anyone just starting out, it would be this. Don't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect plan. Start now, learn as you go, and never be afraid to fail. Failure is part of the journey, and without it, you wouldn't be able to appreciate the success that comes later. Keep pushing, stay focused, and remember why you started in the first place. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I was a regular guy working a 9-to-5 job, feeling like I was stuck in a cycle. I worked at a corporate job, but something about it felt hollow. I would go through my daily routine, wake up early, sit in traffic, work for 8 hours, and then sit in traffic again to get home. Repeat. It was exhausting, mentally draining, and I could see my life slowly fading away in front of me. I wanted more. I needed something more. I wanted to be my own boss, create something meaningful, and have more control over my time. But the question was, how do I get started? How do I break free from this cycle? I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs, and I had no idea where to start. I had an idea that kept nagging at me, an e-commerce business. I had seen so many people online talking about making money through e-commerce, and it seemed like a relatively low-cost way to start something on my own. But of course, it wasn't as easy as it seemed. In the beginning, I didn't know the first thing about building an online store, sourcing products, or even marketing. So, I started doing what any resourceful person would do. I began Googling everything. I spent hours watching YouTube videos, reading articles, and consuming any content that could teach me the basics. I had zero technical skills, so I decided to use Shopify to build my online store. The platform seemed user-friendly enough for a complete beginner like me. I launched my first store selling phone accessories. The product niche was simple, but there were millions of competitors. I quickly learned that having a product on a website wasn't enough. I had to market it somehow. I put together some basic Facebook ads and spent a small amount of money on them. I didn't expect a lot, but when I woke up the next morning and saw a couple of orders had come in, I felt like I had just hit the jackpot. It felt like a small victory, but it was more than just a win. It was proof that people wanted to buy something I was offering. From there, I doubled down on Facebook ads, tweaking and optimizing. But that wasn't enough to get the sales rolling in like I wanted. So, I turned to Instagram. I saw influencers promoting products to their followers, and I thought, why not give this a shot? I started reaching out to micro-influencers, offering them free products in exchange for promoting my store. I was paying them with what little margin I had on the products, but I was hopeful that the exposure would drive traffic and sales. And it worked. Slowly, but surely, orders started pouring in. It wasn't a massive windfall, but it was progress, and for me, that was huge. However, like most entrepreneurs, my journey wasn't a straight line to success. One of the toughest lessons I learned early on was that not everything goes according to plan. I was constantly tweaking my ads, changing my product offerings, and trying to figure out what resonated with my target audience. And then the unthinkable happened. I received an email from Shopify, informing me that my store had been flagged for a policy violation. Apparently, one of my suppliers was using a trademark design for their phone cases, and I didn't know about it. Shopify had suspended my account. My heart sank. I was devastated. I had spent months building up this store, and now it felt like all that hard work had been erased overnight. At that moment, I was faced with a decision: give up or figure out how to fix it. I could have walked away, but something inside me refused to let this be the end of my journey. I contacted Shopify support and explained the situation, and after a few tense days, they reinstated my account with a warning. But the experience was a wake-up call. I needed to be more careful with my suppliers, and I needed to make sure that I wasn't just following the trends but building a legitimate business that wouldn't risk getting shut down for legal reasons. This incident led me to rethink how I was running my business. I had been operating on a very reactive basis, always chasing sales but not thinking long-term. I had to rework my entire strategy, and that's when I decided to pivot. Instead of selling generic products, I wanted to create my own unique brand. This would allow me to build something of my own and reduce the risk of relying on third-party suppliers. I started researching how to manufacture my own products. It was a whole new ballgame. I reached out to manufacturers, negotiated prices, and learned the ins and outs of sourcing high-quality materials. My first brand, a line of eco-friendly phone cases, was born. I launched the new brand with an upgraded marketing strategy. This time, I focused more on building a community around my products, rather than just throwing ads at people. I started posting on social media regularly, sharing behind-the-scenes looks at the manufacturing process, highlighting the eco-friendly nature of the phone cases, and even offering giveaways to engage my audience. Over time, I started seeing a steady increase in sales. The process wasn't as fast as I had hoped, but it was sustainable. People started identifying with the brand, and I started getting repeat customers. I began reinvesting profits back into the business, building a bigger team, and expanding the product line. Looking back, there were plenty of moments when I wanted to quit. It wasn't easy, and the road to success was filled with obstacles. But I kept going because I believed in the vision. My e-commerce business didn't just provide me with a paycheck, it gave me the freedom I had longed for. I was no longer stuck in a corporate job. I was building something of my own, and that felt incredible. I realized that entrepreneurship is more than just making money. It's about growth, overcoming challenges, and believing in yourself when things get tough. It's about making a positive impact, creating jobs, and learning how to adapt in a constantly changing world. Today, my business is thriving, and I'm living the life I once only dreamed of. I've learned so much along the way, and I'm proud of how far I've come. But the most important lesson I've learned is that success doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, perseverance, and the willingness to adapt. If you're willing to put in the work and learn from your mistakes, anything is possible. So, if you're reading this and wondering if it's worth starting your own business, my answer is yes. It's not easy, but the rewards are incredible. If I can do it, so can you. The key is to never stop learning, never give up, and always believe that success is within your reach. Don't let the setbacks hold you back. The journey is worth it, and the destination is worth even more. I remember the day I decided to leave my 9-to-5 job. It wasn't one single moment, but rather a slow burn, a feeling that had been creeping up on me for months. I was working as a marketing manager for a mid-sized tech company in San Francisco, and on the surface, I had everything a person could want: good pay, great benefits, and the promise of steady advancement. But I felt like something was missing. I was stuck in a cycle of emails, meetings, and reports, and I had lost sight of what I truly wanted. Every morning, I would sit in my car, staring at the parking lot, dreading the thought of walking into that office. One afternoon, I was sitting at my desk, looking out the window at the city skyline, and I saw a post on Facebook from an old college friend. She had just launched a small online store selling handmade jewelry and was raving about how well it was going. Her business had exploded over the last few months, and she was traveling to meet customers and suppliers, living a lifestyle that seemed to blend both work and play. That post struck something deep within me, a spark I hadn't realized was there. I started thinking, if she could do it, why couldn't I? At the time, I had no business experience, no real understanding of entrepreneurship, and certainly no idea how to run a company. But I was sick of living for the weekends, stuck in a job where I didn't feel alive. I wanted freedom. I wanted to wake up every morning excited about what I was doing. But there was a massive gap between where I was and where I wanted to be. I spent the next few weeks obsessing over the idea of starting my own business. I devoured articles, watched YouTube videos, and listened to podcasts. I was like a sponge, soaking in every little detail about how to build a business from the ground up. I remember sitting at my kitchen table one night, surrounded by notes and a laptop, trying to figure out what kind of business I could start. I knew I wanted to do something online because the flexibility and scalability appealed to me. After a lot of brainstorming, I settled on the idea of selling digital products. The market was growing, and I figured it was a low-cost way to start. I didn't have any specific skills in graphic design or programming, but I did have a background in marketing and a knack for understanding what people needed. I decided to create templates, workbooks, and other digital resources for small business owners, something that would help them streamline their operations and grow their companies. I knew there was a demand for this kind of content, as many of the entrepreneurs I had spoken to often struggled with the same problems I had faced during my time at my job: lack of time, lack of resources, and an overwhelming number of tasks to juggle. I spent months learning everything I could about creating digital products. I spent hours on Canva designing simple templates, using my marketing skills to create easy-to-follow guides, and even building a basic website on Shopify. There were times when I felt completely out of my depth. The website wasn't perfect, the templates looked basic, and I wasn't sure if anyone would actually buy what I was selling. But I pushed through. I kept telling myself that the first version of anything is always terrible, and I just had to get something out there. In the meantime, I had to figure out how to make the leap from a stable paycheck to total uncertainty. Quitting my job was the hardest part. It wasn't just the fear of losing financial stability, it was the fear of letting go of the comfort and certainty that came with having a real job. But I had to do it. One day, I walked into my boss's office, handed in my resignation letter, and left. It felt like stepping off a cliff, but it also felt exhilarating. I had no plan B, no backup job waiting for me. It was all or nothing. I started working full-time on my business. My first few sales came slowly. I remember the first time someone bought one of my templates, it was like a dream come true. I couldn't believe it. Someone out there had paid money for something I created. Over the next few months, I focused on refining my products, adding new templates, and improving my marketing efforts. I experimented with social media ads, built a small email list, and reached out to influencers in the small business community for collaborations. But the real breakthrough came when I decided to start offering more personalized services. Instead of just selling templates, I started offering coaching sessions for small business owners who needed help with marketing, branding, and digital strategy. This shift in focus changed everything. My income grew, and I began to feel like I was finally building something sustainable. It was still tough. There were days when I felt like I was spinning my wheels, and other days when I didn't know how I was going to make rent, but I kept going. Each small victory kept me motivated. Fast forward a year, and my business was thriving. I had a team of 3 people working with me, including a graphic designer, a customer service manager, and a virtual assistant. We were making consistent sales, and I was able to reinvest the money back into growing the company. I even hired a mentor to help guide me through the next phase of growth. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I had gone from a burnt-out corporate employee to the owner of a small, profitable business that gave me the freedom I had always craved. But here's the thing I didn't expect. Being an entrepreneur doesn't magically solve all your problems. In fact, it often creates new ones. There's no steady paycheck, no guaranteed income, and no one telling you what to do. You have to constantly adapt, learn, and innovate. It's a wild ride, but it's also one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. And the freedom? That's real. I can work from anywhere, make my own schedule, and focus on the things that truly matter. So, would I recommend quitting your job to start a business? It's not for everyone. There's a lot of risk involved, and it requires a ton of hard work and perseverance. But if you're stuck in a job you hate and feel like there's something more out there for you, then go for it. Take the leap. You'll never know what you're capable of until you do. Now, when I look back on those early days, I can't believe how far I've come. I'm not saying it's all been smooth sailing, but I'm proud of what I've built. And I'm even more excited about what the future holds. The best part is that I get to make decisions based on what's right for me, not because someone else tells me what to do. That's the real freedom I was searching for all along. I started my business with a single goal in mind, to prove to myself that I could make something of my own. It wasn't about making millions. It was about taking control of my life and not being dependent on anyone else for my success. Looking back, I realized just how naive I was about the reality of entrepreneurship, but I've learned so much along the way, and I think sharing my journey might help others who are thinking of starting their own businesses. So here it goes. It all started when I was 25, working a dead-end job at a marketing firm. I had no passion for it, and it felt like every day I woke up was another day I was wasting. The pay was fine, the hours were manageable, but I had a constant feeling that I was meant to do something else. My friends had started businesses. Some were doing well, some not so much. What stood out to me was their relentless drive. They were all in, no plan B, just the business and the hustle. I used to think they were crazy. I wasn't ready to take that plunge. But then something changed. My boss at the firm, who, let's just say, was a bit of a micromanager, decided to take a 2-week vacation. For those 2 weeks, I ran the department. I was given free rein to make decisions, hire contractors, and manage our clients. In that short span of time, I realized something crucial. I had the skills. It wasn't rocket science. The systems I was managing weren't complex, but I was doing things that worked. And I wasn't a specialist. I was a generalist who could get things done. That's when the idea for my business hit me. I wanted to start a digital marketing agency, but not just any agency. I wanted to cater specifically to small businesses in my area, local shops, restaurants, and service providers that needed help with social media marketing and SEO but couldn't afford big agencies. It seemed like a niche that could actually make a difference. The first step was the scariest, quitting my job. I remember telling my boss, and he looked at me like I was insane. He was convinced I was making a huge mistake, but I had been planning this for months. I had saved up enough money to live off of for about 6 months, and I knew that if I didn't try now, I would regret it for the rest of my life. The first few months were rough. I was doing everything myself: sales, client work, marketing, and even bookkeeping. I didn't have a fancy office, just a desk in my living room. But I was making progress. Slowly but surely, I signed my first few clients. They were small businesses with modest budgets, but they trusted me, and that was everything. Each project I completed built my portfolio, and I started getting more referrals. However, the real struggle came when I realized how much I didn't know. I thought I understood marketing, but running a business meant dealing with taxes, legal matters, and all the little details that go into keeping things afloat. I remember trying to set up my own accounting system, and it was a nightmare. I made several mistakes that cost me money, things like not understanding quarterly tax payments and misclassifying expenses. I tried to fix it by reading blogs and watching YouTube videos, but nothing beats talking to a professional. Eventually, I hired an accountant, and that alone saved me from making huge financial blunders. Along the way, I also realized that I couldn't do it all. At first, I was stubborn. I thought that if I just worked harder, I could handle everything. But I soon realized that as my client list grew, I was burning out. I had to hire people. The first person I brought on was a graphic designer to handle all the visuals. She was talented, and it gave me more time to focus on sales and client management. The second hire was a copywriter. That was a game changer. Having a team to rely on was a huge weight off my shoulders, and it allowed me to scale the business in ways I hadn't imagined. Still, there were moments when I doubted myself. There were months when clients didn't pay on time, and I was struggling to make ends meet. There were projects that didn't go as planned, and I questioned whether I was cut out for this. I had days where I felt like I was going to lose it all. But every time I wanted to give up, I reminded myself of why I started. I wanted to be in control of my future, to build something that was mine. One of the pivotal moments came when I landed a big client, a local restaurant chain that had been struggling with its online presence. They had an outdated website and very little social media engagement. I worked with them for months, revamping their online strategy, creating consistent content, and improving their SEO. By the time I was done, their sales had increased significantly, and they were getting a lot more foot traffic. That client referred me to 2 others, and within a year, I was managing over 10 clients. That's when I realized that this wasn't just a side hustle, this was a real business. But the real breakthrough came a few years into my journey when I made the decision to invest in branding and professional website development. I had always been focused on the work and not the business image, but a friend of mine, who was a branding expert, gave me a wake-up call. "You have to think of your business as a product," she told me. "Your brand needs to be just as strong as your client work." So, I invested a significant portion of my profits into rebranding, new logo, website, and marketing materials. The results were immediate. I got higher quality leads, and my agency's credibility soared. Fast forward to today. My business has grown exponentially. I now have a full-time team of 10 people, including project managers, marketers, designers, and writers. We've expanded into providing full-service digital marketing strategies, and we work with both local businesses and national clients. I've learned so much over the years, from hiring the right people to scaling at a sustainable pace. I no longer work 18-hour days, though I still work a lot, and I've learned to delegate and trust my team. The one thing that still stands out the most is that there was never a big break. Success came slowly and steadily. There were no overnight wins, just consistent effort, learning from mistakes, and staying focused on what I wanted to achieve. Entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. And while it's incredibly rewarding to see where I am now, I don't forget those early days when I wasn't sure if I would make it. Those struggles shaped me. So, if you're reading this and wondering if it's possible to start your own business, I can tell you this: it's not easy, but it's worth it. You will face challenges, doubts, and setbacks. But if you keep pushing forward, you'll figure it out. The key is to learn from every experience and never stop evolving. I'm still learning every day, and I wouldn't have it any other way. This is the story of how I turned my side hustle into a thriving business, and the ups and downs I experienced along the way. It's a roller coaster of self-doubt, hard work, and a whole lot of learning by doing. If you've ever wondered whether it's worth it to take the plunge into entrepreneurship, here's my story. Maybe it will help you make your decision or just give you some perspective on how messy the journey can be. Let me set the stage. It all started a few years ago when I was working a 9-to-5 job at a corporate office. I had a decent salary, benefits, and what seemed like a clear career path. But I hated it. Every day felt like I was just checking off boxes, going through the motions. I was good at my job, but I wasn't passionate about it. I spent more time daydreaming about what life could be like if I did something I truly cared about. That's when I started experimenting with side hustles. My first attempt was selling vintage clothing online. I had always loved thrifting, and it seemed like a fun way to make extra cash. So, I spent my weekends scouring thrift stores, picking up unique pieces, and photographing them for resale on eBay and Poshmark. I wasn't making a lot of money at first, but the whole process was exciting. I loved curating items and seeing how people would react to them. However, the problem was that there was no scalability to it. I could only source so many items in a given weekend, and after a while, I realized that I wasn't passionate about selling clothes. What I loved was the idea of running a business and seeing growth. So, I pivoted. I had always been interested in tech and gadgets, and that's where my next idea came from: tech accessories. I decided to create an online store that sold affordable, high-quality tech accessories, things like phone cases, charging cables, portable speakers, and Bluetooth earphones. The market was crowded, but I figured I could carve out a niche by offering better customer service and faster shipping than my competitors. I spent countless nights researching suppliers, building a website, and figuring out how to get my products to customers quickly. I had no experience in e-commerce or digital marketing, but I was determined to make it work. The first few months were a blur. I used every free resource I could find to learn about online marketing. I watched countless YouTube tutorials on SEO, social media ads, and email marketing. I was running Facebook and Instagram ads, sending out discount codes, and trying to build a following. But nothing seemed to be working. My sales were barely covering the cost of my inventory, and I was losing sleep over whether I had made a huge mistake. I was constantly second-guessing myself, wondering if I should just give up and go back to my steady job. But something clicked one day. After weeks of frustration, I realized that the issue wasn't the products or the market. It was my approach. I wasn't making enough personal connections with my customers. I wasn't engaging with them on social media or responding to their messages in a way that made them feel heard. I also realized that my website wasn't as user-friendly as it could be, and my checkout process was cumbersome. So, I invested in improving the website, made sure it was mobile-friendly, and started to interact with my followers more. I began sending personalized thank you notes with every order and offering real-time customer service. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but slowly, things started to improve. After about 6 months of trial and error, I started seeing a steady stream of sales. I was still working my day job, but the business was becoming something I could actually envision growing. I continued to reinvest the small profits back into the business, improving my product selection and expanding my marketing efforts. I started to hire freelancers to help with social media management and content creation, freeing up some of my time to focus on scaling. Around this time, I faced one of my biggest challenges: inventory management. I had no idea how to predict what products would sell and when, and I kept running into stockouts on my best-selling items. I had no proper system for tracking inventory, and it caused a lot of stress. The last thing you want is to run out of products when you're starting to gain traction. So, I hired an inventory consultant to help me set up a better system. It was a significant expense, but it was worth it. Once I had better control over my stock levels, I could predict demand more accurately and avoid losing sales. As the business continued to grow, I realized that my day job was no longer fulfilling my needs, both financially and emotionally. I had reached a point where I had enough income coming in from the business that I could afford to quit my job and focus on it full-time. It was a scary decision. I had never been without a regular paycheck, and I wasn't entirely sure I was ready. But I knew that if I didn't take the leap now, I might never do it. So, I handed in my resignation. It was terrifying. The stability of my corporate job was something I had taken for granted, but deep down, I knew I had to take control of my own future. I made the decision to go all in, and it felt like jumping off a cliff with no parachute. The first few months were nerve-wracking, and there were many sleepless nights. But I kept pushing. I hired a small team to help with operations and customer service, and I focused on expanding the brand and improving the products. Fast forward to today, and my tech accessory business is thriving. We've built a loyal customer base, and our sales continue to grow year over year. We've even expanded into international markets. I'm proud of what we've accomplished, but I'm not done yet. There's always more to learn, new challenges to overcome, and better ways to serve our customers. But looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. Every mistake Every setback, every failure was a stepping stone toward success. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. It takes time, persistence, and a willingness to adapt and evolve. You will doubt yourself, question your decisions, and wonder if it's worth it. But if you're passionate, willing to put in the work, and embrace the journey, the rewards can be more than just financial. They can be the freedom to live life on your own terms. And that's a feeling you can't put a price on. I had no idea what I was doing when I started my company. I was 23, fresh out of college, and filled with idealistic energy, convinced I was going to change the world. My friends thought I was crazy. My family wasn't much better, but they loved me enough to at least pretend to support my crazy idea. The thing is, I had no business experience, no capital, and zero understanding of how tough the entrepreneurial journey really was going to be. Looking back, I'm amazed that I didn't give up after the first 6 months. Let's rewind a bit. I graduated from a state university with a degree in communications. The plan, or at least the one I told myself, was to work in a marketing agency for a few years, climb the corporate ladder, and then start something on the side. That was the idea, but the reality was far different. I ended up working for a startup right out of college, and honestly, it felt more like I was doing a whole bunch of freelance work without the freedom. There was no career ladder. There was just a ton of work, very little pay, and the feeling that no matter what you did, it wasn't enough. About a year into this job, I realized that I was unhappy. But more than that, I was frustrated with the corporate structure. The higher-ups didn't seem to care about the employees. People were constantly being replaced with cheaper labor, and everyone else was scrambling to keep their jobs. I knew deep down that this wasn't the environment I wanted to spend the rest of my life in. So, I made a decision that terrified me, quitting my job to start my own company. The first few months were exciting. I had a vague idea of what I wanted to do. I had been working with marketing and social media strategies at my job, and I was good at it. I had a deep understanding of how to help small businesses build their online presence. I thought, why not help local businesses grow with a service they desperately need but can't afford from the big agencies? I had a couple of $1,000s saved up, which I figured would be enough to survive for at least 6 months without any income. I started building my brand, developing my website, and reaching out to small businesses. I did everything myself. I designed the logo, wrote the copy, shot the photos, and managed the social media accounts. Every penny I had went into making my business look professional, but there were times when I couldn't even afford a fancy lunch. It was a constant battle to make ends meet. The early clients I did manage to secure were small businesses, local shops, and restaurants. They were hesitant at first, but seemed to trust me enough to give me a shot. I was working harder than I ever had before, sometimes 18-hour days, trying to learn how to juggle all the different aspects of running a business. I didn't just have to worry about the clients. I had to deal with taxes, marketing, finding leads, and doing all the administrative work. There was no team to rely on. It was just me. And honestly, the first year was a blur of self-doubt, late nights, and way too much coffee. Then came the first real crisis. After landing a few more clients, I thought I was finally making progress. But I hit a brick wall when I realized that I had been underpricing my services. I had offered my marketing services at a price so low that I wasn't even covering the cost of the tools I was using. To make matters worse, some clients were paying late, and I couldn't make ends meet. I had to make a choice, raise my prices and risk losing clients or continue struggling. It was terrifying. I knew if I raised my prices, I'd lose some people, but I couldn't afford to keep going the way I was. I took a leap of faith and raised my prices. And guess what? Most of my clients stayed. Some even signed long-term contracts. That was when I realized that the value of my service had been underappreciated by both me and the clients. This was the first lesson I learned. Don't be afraid to charge what you're worth. The next big breakthrough came when I started learning about SEO and content marketing. At that point, I had a decent portfolio, but my ability to market my own services was terrible. I was still running my business like a hobby and not like a serious company. One day, while researching how to improve my website's traffic, I realized that I could apply these same principles to help my clients in a much deeper way. I spent countless hours reading blogs, taking courses, and experimenting with SEO strategies. Within months, my website started getting traffic, and that traffic began converting into paying clients. With SEO in place, I began to attract better quality clients. I was no longer scraping by. I was starting to generate steady income. It was the first time I really felt like I had built something valuable. But even then, things weren't perfect. I had a handful of great clients, but I still struggled with the unpredictability of freelance work. Some months, I had a flood of clients, and other months, I'd barely make enough to cover expenses. It wasn't until I hired my first employee that things started to change. I was terrified of hiring anyone because I didn't want to take on the responsibility of paying someone else's salary. But I was stretched too thin, and I realized I needed help to grow. I brought on a project manager, then a couple of contractors, and soon enough, I had a small team working with me. Delegating was a game changer. I could finally focus on growing the business instead of getting bogged down in the day-to-day. Fast forward 3 years, and I now run a company with 12 employees. We've worked with over 200 clients, and our revenue has grown exponentially. But here's the thing, it wasn't easy. There were so many times when I thought about giving up, when I wondered if I had made a huge mistake. But every time I faced a setback, I'd remind myself why I started in the first place. I wanted to build something that wasn't just a job, but a legacy, a company that could make a real impact in the world. If I could give advice to anyone starting out in business, it would be this. Don't expect it to be easy. There will be nights when you feel like everything is falling apart, and there will be moments when you question if it's all worth it. But keep going. Learn from your mistakes, surround yourself with people who push you forward, and never stop adapting. Entrepreneurship isn't a linear path. It's a journey of constant growth, failures, and small victories. Now, I get to wake up every morning excited about what I do. I'm proud of the business I've built, but I'm even prouder of the lessons I've learned along the way. It wasn't always fun, but looking back, every struggle was worth it. I've always been someone who had a deep love for technology. Growing up, I was the kid who would tear apart my old electronics just to see how they worked. But while most of my friends were busy playing outside, I was coding on my first computer, a hand-me-down from my dad. I didn't know it back then, but that curiosity would eventually lead me down the path of entrepreneurship. And looking back, the journey has been nothing short of a roller coaster. It all started in 2015. I was in my last year of college, studying computer science, when I came across a problem that would soon become my business. I was working on a school project, and I noticed how disorganized the online collaboration tools were. The interfaces were clunky, and the features were often mismatched with what actual users needed. I thought to myself, there has to be a better way to make remote teamwork more efficient. Little did I know that this thought would be the seed for my company. At the time, I had no intention of starting a business. I wasn't one of those people who had a clear vision of becoming an entrepreneur from a young age. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was a real opportunity. I started sketching ideas on my notepad, making crude wireframes of what the app might look like, and jotting down features that would make collaboration simpler, cleaner, and faster. I even went so far as to write out a rudimentary business plan, though I didn't know anything about running a company at that point. After graduation, I decided to take the plunge. I had a steady job offer from a well-known tech company, but I knew deep down that if I didn't take this chance, I'd always wonder what if. So, with a lot of savings, a bit of naivety, and the unwavering support of my family, I quit the job offer and started working on my app full-time. The first few months were grueling. I didn't have much money to throw around, so I worked out of a small apartment, often staying up late coding and trying to figure out how to make the idea work. I quickly realized how important it was to find the right co-founders. I needed someone who was better than me at certain aspects. While I was skilled at coding, I had no idea about the business side of things, and that's when I met Sarah. She was an experienced marketer who'd worked at a couple of startups, and her knowledge was exactly what I needed. Sarah came on board, and together, we set out to build the product. But even with Sarah's expertise, things weren't easy. We hit wall after wall. The app kept crashing in ways I couldn't explain, user feedback was inconsistent, and the early iterations of the product felt clunky and unrefined. We spent weeks building, tweaking, and reworking the interface, all the while trying to balance our personal lives with the growing weight of the business. But, despite the setbacks, we managed to release the first version of the app. It wasn't perfect, but it was usable. We reached out to our network, offering the tool to friends and acquaintances for free in exchange for feedback. Slowly but surely, people started to notice. One of the early users was a small startup that loved the product and integrated it into their workflow. That was the first big break. Word started to spread, and we were getting a few new users every week. But that wasn't enough to sustain us. By late 2016, we had almost run out of money. our savings were gone, and the app wasn't making nearly enough revenue to keep the lights on. It was one of the darkest moments in the business. I remember sitting with Sarah at a coffee shop, discussing how we'd have to shut down if things didn't turn around. We both knew we couldn't afford to keep going for much longer. But then, out of the blue, we got an email. It was from a venture capital firm that had seen our product online and was interested in talking. At first, we thought it was a scam, but after a few rounds of meetings, it turned out to be legitimate. The firm offered us a seed investment, enough to keep us afloat and even hire a couple of additional team members. It wasn't the huge sum we dreamed of, but it was enough to keep us going. That investment marked the turning point. With the new funds, we were able to hire a small team, fix the bugs that had plagued us, and focus on marketing. We also hired a UI/UX designer to give the app a much-needed makeover. Slowly, users began to pour in, and the app gained traction. In 2017, we crossed the 10,000 user mark, and by 2018, we were at 100,000 active users. The growth wasn't explosive, but it was steady, and that consistency helped us build a solid foundation. Fast forward to 2020, and we had fully established ourselves as a key player in the collaboration tools market. We were making a decent amount of revenue, enough to sustain the business and continue expanding. We had also secured another round of funding, which helped us scale even further. But with growth came new challenges. Competition in the space had ramped up, and we were no longer the new kids on the block. We had to adapt or risk being left behind. That's when we decided to innovate again. We listened closely to our users and implemented features that no one else was offering, like AI-assisted project management and real-time collaboration tools. We also pivoted to focusing on enterprise clients, which helped us secure some major contracts with large corporations. It was this shift that really helped us break through the noise. Now, in 2025, our company is still going strong. We've grown to over 1 million users, and our app is used by teams in over 50 countries. We've expanded our product line and even launched a series of educational courses to help users get the most out of our tools. We've gone from a small, two-person operation to a company with 150 employees, spread across multiple offices worldwide. I look back on those early days, when we were scraping by, and I'm in awe of how far we've come. Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. It's about persistence, adaptability, and a willingness to learn from failure. There have been times when I thought about giving up, but every setback has been an opportunity to grow. The key, I believe, is not letting failure define you, but using it as fuel to push forward. If there's one thing I've learned through this whole process, it's that the road to success is rarely straight. It's filled with twists, turns, and unexpected bumps along the way. But if you're passionate, if you're willing to put in the work, and if you don't give up when things get tough, you can achieve things you never thought possible. So to anyone out there thinking of starting their own business, take the leap. It won't be easy, but the rewards are worth it. The only way to fail is to never try. I was never supposed to be an entrepreneur. I grew up in a small town where the idea of startup culture was about as foreign as the concept of flying cars. I was the kid who, in high school, thought being a lawyer or a doctor was the dream, the successful path. But here I am today, sitting on a chair in my office, which I still can't quite believe is actually mine, typing out a story of how I turned a random idea into a business that makes millions annually. It all started in 2013. I was fresh out of college, unsure of what I wanted to do with my life. I had a decent job lined up at a marketing firm in the city, where I had interned during college. But every morning, I dreaded getting on the train and heading to that sterile office building. I was part of a team, but I felt completely invisible. I was just another cog in the machine, and deep down, I knew I wasn't meant for that life. Then one day, something happened that changed everything. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was at a local coffee shop, sipping on a cappuccino while scrolling through my phone. I was reading a thread on Reddit, one of those startup stories where people share their breakthrough moments. A comment caught my eye. It was from a guy who started his business in his garage, selling a product that didn't even exist yet, simply by pre-selling it online. This comment stuck with me for days. I kept thinking about it. What if I could do something like that? What if I could create a product, a business, a brand that people would buy into before it even existed? I started researching, reading every article and watching every video I could find about entrepreneurship. I devoured books on the subject. I didn't have an idea for a product yet, But I had something more important, the desire to break free from the grind. Then, one morning in late summer, I woke up with an idea. It was simple, yet powerful. A product that combined two things I was passionate about: technology and travel. I was always an avid traveler, and I spent way too much time researching gadgets to make travel easier. But there was one thing missing: a portable charging solution that could work across different countries with varying plug types and voltages. I did some quick market research. I found that while there were many portable chargers, none of them offered universal compatibility for international travel. Some were bulky, others didn't have enough power, and none of them seemed to fit the need I was envisioning. That was my light bulb moment. I could create a sleek, compact, all-in-one charging device that would work for travelers everywhere. I wanted to make it smart, powerful, and, importantly, affordable. I didn't have a ton of savings. In fact, I had just a few $1,000s in my bank account. But I figured, what the hell? I could either keep working my dead-end job, feeling miserable, or I could take the leap and go after something that could potentially change my life. So I did what any broke 23-year-old would do. I pitched the idea to a few friends and family members. At first, the reactions were mixed. My parents thought I was nuts. Why would anyone buy a product from someone who has no experience in manufacturing or design? My dad asked. My friends were supportive, but skeptical. It sounds cool, but you don't know the first thing about building a product, they said. But despite the doubts, I pushed forward. I started researching manufacturers, looking for a reliable partner who could help bring my vision to life. I found one in China, a factory that specialized in custom electronics. I sent them a rough sketch of my idea, and within a few weeks, they sent me back a prototype. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to make me believe this could work. I then created a website, built a simple landing page, and set up a crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter. I had no idea what I was doing, but I had a gut feeling that people would want this. I made a video cringeworthy in hindsight, but it was real. I showed my prototype, talked about the pain points of international travel, and why my product could make things easier. I set a goal of $50,000, figuring it was a reasonable amount to cover manufacturing costs and initial marketing. The first week was slow. I raised a couple of $1,000s, but I wasn't anywhere near my goal. I started to panic. Was I delusional? Was I chasing a pipe dream? But then something unexpected happened. A major tech blog picked up my campaign. They featured my product in a roundup of the coolest gadgets for travelers. Suddenly, the pledges started pouring in. By the end of the campaign, I had raised $110,000, more than double my original goal. The outpouring of support was overwhelming, and I couldn't believe it. I had successfully launched a product, but now the real work began. I used the funds to place a large order with the manufacturer and worked tirelessly with them to perfect the design. I spent months ironing out the issues with the prototype, and by the time the first batch of products arrived, it was almost exactly what I had envisioned. I launched my e-commerce site, and sales started to come in. Slowly at first, then more steadily. It wasn't easy. There were challenges at every corner. One of the biggest hurdles was dealing with customer service. I quickly realized that no matter how great your product is, the experience people have with your brand matters just as much. I had to hire a small team to help with customer support, returns, and logistics. It was tough. There were days when we got overwhelmed with complaints, refunds, and delays. But we powered through, always making sure to listen to the customers and improve. As the business grew, so did the complexity of managing it. I hired more people, launched new products, and expanded into international markets. I eventually invested in building a brand that people trusted. I spent years learning about marketing, social media, and how to build an engaged customer base. Over time, the business became less about selling a product and more about creating an experience for our customers. Our brand was no longer just a charger, it was a lifestyle. Fast forward to today, and I've built a company with over 50 employees, hundreds of thousands of loyal customers, and an annual revenue in the millions. I've been able to travel the world, something I never could have imagined as a kid, let alone as someone who thought they'd be stuck in an office job forever. The journey wasn't linear. There were moments when I wanted to quit, when I felt like I was in over my head. But I kept going. I learned from my failures, surrounded myself with people who knew more than me, and never lost sight of the bigger picture. I'm proud of what I built, but I never forget where I came from, that small town, the feeling of being stuck, and the spark that came from a Reddit thread and a crazy idea. Now, I'm living the dream I never thought was possible. A few years ago, I was in the middle of a pretty standard 9 to 5 grind. I had a comfortable job at a corporate office, doing project management for a mid-tier tech company. I was making good money, had benefits, and the work was fine. But something about it never felt right. It wasn't that I was unhappy, far from it. I was just unfulfilled. The idea of sitting at a desk, making someone else's vision come to life, slowly drained me. I wasn't building anything for myself. I had a stable job, but I was starting to feel like I was squandering my own potential. So, like many people, I decided to do something about it. I didn't know what yet, but I knew it had to be something outside the corporate grind. I began by reading a lot. I devoured books, blogs, and podcasts about entrepreneurship. The stories were fascinating. People who started small and built empires. I figured I could do that too. After all, I had the skills, right? I had been running projects at work for years, handling budgets, deadlines, and teams. Surely, I could apply that knowledge somewhere else. So, I started brainstorming ideas. The first idea that came to mind was a tech startup. I had worked in tech for a while, so I thought it'd be a natural fit. I started looking into app development and software solutions. After countless hours of research, I realized that the space was flooded. There were millions of apps out there, and most of them had already been perfected. I wasn't sure what kind of problem I could solve. So, I shelved that idea and moved on to the next one, an online store. That seemed like a no-brainer. E-commerce was booming, and I'd heard of so many people making 6 figures or more from selling niche products online. I started small, focusing on a product I loved, eco-friendly home goods. I believed that people were becoming more environmentally conscious, and I wanted to provide them with better alternatives. I spent weeks researching suppliers, setting up an e-commerce website, and learning about social media marketing. I bought inventory, set up a Shopify store, and launched my products. At first, things went well. I made a few sales, got some traction on social media, and even received some positive feedback from customers. But then, reality hit. The sales slowed down, and I realized I was in over my head. I didn't have the resources to scale the business, and the competition was fierce. I wasn't prepared for the marketing costs, inventory management, or customer service demands. I couldn't afford to hire people to help, so I was doing everything myself, and that quickly led to burnout. After a few months of struggling, I decided to cut my losses and close the store. It was a tough decision, but I didn't want to keep pouring time and money into something that wasn't going anywhere. That was my first big failure as an entrepreneur. I could have given up then. I could have gone back to my safe, predictable job and just put the whole entrepreneurship thing behind me. But something inside me didn't want to quit. I had learned so much during that short-lived e-commerce venture, and I realized that while I had failed, I hadn't truly failed. I had just learned what didn't work, and I could use that to move forward. So, I decided to try something different. Instead of jumping straight into another business idea, I started consulting. I had a lot of experience in project management and had worked with a variety of clients in different industries. I figured I could use my skills to help small businesses streamline their operations and improve their workflows. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. The first few months were slow, but I slowly started to build a reputation. I networked like crazy, got a few referrals, and by the end of the year, I had a small but steady stream of clients. Then, an opportunity came along that changed everything. I had been working with a small startup that was struggling with project management tools. They were using outdated software and had no real structure in place. I started helping them set up a new system, and the founder asked me if I could build them a custom tool. At first, I didn't think I could. I wasn't a developer, but I had been in the tech industry long enough to know what was possible and what wasn't. I told him I could help find a developer who could do it, and that's exactly what I did. The tool we created worked so well that the startup began recommending it to other companies in their network. Soon enough, I had several requests from other startups wanting their own version of the tool. That's when the idea for my next business was born. I realized that there was a big gap in the market for custom project management tools tailored to specific industries. Most tools out there were general purpose, but each industry had unique needs. I could leverage my experience in project management to build these custom solutions. The only problem? I didn't know how to code, but I wasn't deterred. I hired a developer and worked closely with them to create a prototype. I also started learning the basics of coding so I could better communicate my ideas and understand the process. It wasn't easy, but I was determined. We built the product, tested it, and after a lot of trial and error, We had something we were proud of. We started selling it to small businesses, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. It wasn't long before we had a few paying clients, and I was able to quit my day job for good. That was about 3 years ago, and since then, the company has grown faster than I ever expected. We now have a small team of developers, salespeople, and support staff. We're constantly iterating on the product and adding new features. We've even expanded into other verticals, offering different types of business solutions. The success has been surreal, but I try not to let it go to my head. The truth is, every step of the way, I've faced challenges, some small, some massive, but each time, I've learned from the experience. I'm not saying the journey has been easy or that I've figured everything out. There are still plenty of nights when I lay awake, wondering if the next round of funding will come through or if we're on the right path. There are moments when I second-guess my decisions or feel overwhelmed by the constant pressure. But at the end of the day, I've built something I'm proud of. And more importantly, I built it for myself. It's been a wild ride, and I'm far from finished. So, if you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Start small, fail fast, and keep learning. Don't be afraid to pivot if something isn't working. The only real failure is quitting. Success doesn't happen overnight, and there's no magic formula. But if you stay persistent and keep improving, you'll eventually get to where you want to be. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.